Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and today marks roughly the 4th week of the Season 3 content of The War Within. And the meta for the season has so far started to crystallize a bit, started to solidify, with certain playstyles rising up top above others. However, Blizz is already implementing some class tuning and changes in order to try to shake up the meta just a little bit. And recently we actually have been seeing certain playstyles that are not necessarily popular, some would even call them slightly underrated, but they've actually started to perform really well this season so far, and are actually holding their own and are looking somewhat competitive. And this isn't something that happens all that often throughout seasons. Usually by this point everybody knows what the top 5 classes are for the season, and that's all players start to play if you're looking to really take Mythic Plus season very seriously. And while it does seem like a lot of players are gravitating towards Arcane Mages and Frost Death Knights and Subtlety Rogues, which are definitely very popular, the season does seem to have quite a lot of diversity when it comes to class and spec options, as there's so many playstyles that can do well and are viable. They're just right now being discovered by the large swaths of the population. So for this video, I actually just want to highlight 5 class specs that are definitely underrated, that are definitely underrepresented, but are doing some incredible work so far within Season 3 content of Mythic Plus in War Within. As always, if you guys want to see breakdowns like these for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow this channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, the first spec that I really wanted to highlight is the new spec that's seen a lot of more fun in the spotlight when it comes to this season, and that is the Fury Warrior. And I've watched Fury Warriors become very strong from like way back in Shadowlands, but over the last few expansions and seasons, I've been watching this spec take more of a backseat when it comes to AoE content. Then they got nerfed some more and taken more of a backseat, and then more and more nerfs later down the line allowed him to essentially not really be played that much for M+. And Fury Warrior, I think, when it comes to majority of players, most players enjoy this spec in particular when it comes to playing a warrior. It is fast-paced, it is super engaging, to some degree it can also be even carpal tunnel inducing, but a lot of players really vibe with Warrior, Fury Warrior in particular. But it hasn't really been the strongest when it comes to M+, but recently started to pick up pace a little bit. Now, Fury, what sucks about Fury is you are hard capped. You can only hit so many targets when it comes to AoE. However, the playstyle of Slayer is opening up some new possibilities because of a bug fix that allows the Rage Blows to now be able to proc from Reap the Storm. Or rather, Rage Blow from the tier set can proc Reap the Storm, changing the proc rate from the tier set to per target hit instead of per instance of damage, meaning you get a lot more procs than before. Essentially, this is how you would want to break down the Slayer Fury playstyle. With Slayer, randomly, your abilities have a chance to strike at the target, which can increase your execute damage and lead to more execute usage, either in the execute window when the enemy is weak, or even outside of executes as well. More executes also does create some cooldown reduction mechanics for Blade Storm, so you can get a shorter cooldown for this ability to use it more often. Blade Storm on its own not only does a lot of damage, but also applies a debuff of Overwhelm to the targets it hits. So those targets will take more damage from the Fury Warrior, stacking. Overwhelmed with the interaction with the tier set allows Raging Blows against an overwhelmed target to have a chance to proc this effect called Reap the Storm, which is like a mini Blade Storm effect. As you can see right here, I can proc it over and over, and the higher the stacks Overwhelmed are against the target, the more of a chances to be able to proc it. And essentially for Mythic Plus dungeons, the more procs you can get for Reap the Storm, the more AoE damage you're going to be doing as your Fury Warrior. This is because Reap the Storm actually does a lot of damage, doesn't have nearly as high of a target cap, so this allows you to have some single target damage, the procs almost guaranteed AoE. Previously, the RNG was not super favorable, as every time you would press Rage and Blow against an overwhelmed target, it would only check to see if you hit that Rage and Blow proc against your priority target. But now, because the ability of Whirlwind causes your Rage and Blow to hit multiple targets, they fixed it so now that Rage and Blow has this like chance to check whether they can get a proc against every target that you're hitting. And if everybody has this stack so overwhelmed, this means you almost essentially can get guaranteed procs of Rage Blow that you can spam, or Reap the Storm rather, that you can spam over and over again. This ability by itself does so much more AoE damage for you while you continue to prioritize single target damage. Altogether, this allows Fury Warriors to Blade Storm while they're Blade Storming, and continue to proc this random Reap the Storm mini Blade Storms over and over and over endlessly. It is super engaging and super fun, and definitely someone will check it out if you're looking to play your warrior within this season. And when our strong melee comps have begun recently, warriors are actually highly valued for that attack power buff that they provide, which can make those physical damage comps even more potent. Another class pack that actually has some competitive value, but it still hasn't really found the numbers needed to be super popular, is the Feral Druid. This is one of the best seasons for Ferals in particular, partially because physical damage comps have begun to be a lot better. Any kind of comp combination with a warrior in the group, as well as maybe a restoration shaman for that additional auto attacks from the Wind Fury buff, together with potentially maybe a monk debuff so enemies take additional physical damage, this makes melee comps even stronger than before. And druids generally are pretty good season to season, but this season, because melee are so potent, Feral actually ends up coming out on top. Feral has always had a very strong playstyle. While it is generally a more difficult spec to get into, I've always enjoyed its AoE gameplay because you have a mix of huge AoE damage but also priority damage, which is insanely valuable in higher end Mythic Plus dungeons. Talents such as Apex Predator's Craving allows rips, which you can spread easily to every target around you with Primal Wrath. Those rips have a chance to make your next Ferocious Bite free and deal max damage to your priority target. And those Ferocious Bites also cleave all targets with a rip. So it's like a cyclical AoE that gives you a ton of priority damage. So the most scary enemy in a trash pack, or let's say pulling a bunch of trash onto a boss, means you get even better single target damage output, which is highly valuable with an M+ content and is generally very impactful. So a good portion of your playstyle just ends up being put bleeds on people and wait until Bite is lit up in order to press it again and again and again. This also helps because Feral Druids are heavily invested into Druid of the Claw, where their Bites are replaced with Ravage, which is a harder hitting version of Bite that has a fairly heavy bleed component on top of it. And with the current tier set, sometimes those free Ravages can actually just proc a second time at 100% full value against the target, while providing you with stats like Critical Strike and Haste, but also increasing your blade damage by 30%. So it like plays itself in some way. On top of it, as a Feral Druid, you still have a very strong Druid kit, and that's what's really good about Druids in particular is no matter the spec, you still come with a Swiss Army knife of tools that can help out your groups from Soothe, remove Corruption, you have a fairly short cooldown for your Skull Bash, fairly good set of defenses with Wall, cheat death mechanics, you also got a little bit of this utility with the group with Innervate, Nature's Vigil, Ursul's Vortex, Typhoon, Roar for AoE or a Bash if that's what you're looking for. You got Stampede and Roar, which could also be great for movement speed. So you got a lot of tools that you're bringing into a dungeon situation, plus a very valuable buff for additional versatility with Mark of the Wild, which is right now in the season is very highly valued. So you're literally bringing everything that most groups will want, though right now it looks like Feral Druids, while they're technically performing well, they are a little bit bound to certain comps. So any physical damage comps in particular generally ends up being much better for them for the season. Now another class pack that's actually performing surprisingly well for the season, and I'm so sad it's not like S tier right now unless you're rating, and that is Preservation of Ochre. This spec, as far as healers are concerned, is giga insane. Preservation is at its peak state right now as of this moment. It is doing really well, and it's actually also very powerful. As somebody who actually plays quite a decent bit of Pres, especially this season, I'm a huge fan of where they're at the moment. However, they're also not that bad for M+. They're just not really the best, but at least right now not ranked the highest, but they're incredibly fun. Preservation of Ochre, and I think what's really holding it back from, let's say, popularity is the complexity of the spec. There's a lot of things you gotta do if you want to weave abilities together. For many healers, if you just need to heal somebody who's super low, you just target them and start spamming a basic healing ability to get them topped off. Preservation can't quite do that. It needs to use abilities like Echo in order to apply these stacks of buff on allies, and then you got to create Echo combinations where you're able to, let's say, buff yourself, then heal yourself, and that will echo to your allies to heal them as well in terms of big AoE burst healing. Then there's also positional healing, which is generally not that easy to play around with for most players in general. However, while there are some complexities of the spec, there are also some aspects of it that are really easy. And one of the easiest parts of the spec is just how it deals damage and how much damage it can do with a very simple rotation. Primarily, most of your playstyle revolves around spamming Chrono Flame, which is that ability gotten from the Chrono Warden, just amplifies the Living Flame to be slightly stronger, and it hits really hard even in single target. Together with the tiers that the Evokers have access to, they essentially can use the ability of Tip the Scales in order to gain the buff of Temporal Burst as part of the Chrono Warden playstyle. Their tier set reduces the cooldown of Tip the Scales, so it gives you more uptime in Temporal Burst window. But also, while that window is active, Chrono Flames will now strike additional targets, deal additional damage, and increase Essence ability damage and healing by 30%, which is massive. Primarily, what's massive about it is the damage output of this playstyle in particular, as the fact that you're able to cleave multiple targets fairly easily, and when you use abilities like Deep Breath, for example, you can cleave even more targets than usual, at least for a couple of volleys of these Living Flames. And this alone does a ton of damage right now in Mythic Plus. While the spec is complex, they wanted to make sure at least part of Preservation is incredibly simple, and that is their damage output. It is really easy, but it's so incredibly hard-hitting right now, to the point where Preservation is actually one of the highest DPSing healers in the game, at least when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. Now, in Mythic Plus dungeons, healers are primarily there to heal the group. However, their damage done and contribution to damage of the group is not insignificant. The more damage you can do inside of a Mythic Plus dungeon, the better. And generally, healers try to maximize their damage whenever healing is not necessary. But majority of healers, when it comes to the overall run for a dungeon, will usually reach about 1 million DPS per second. So their damage is not amazing, definitely behind tanks and other DPS classes, but at least they can deal like a decent bit of overall output. Preservation Evokers easily can swing 2 million DPS a second for the entirety of their dungeon run, just from the tier set interaction alone, which they have to use anyway. They have to spam Living Flame in order to get more procs to heal their allies, so it's something that they'll be doing automatically, not necessarily going for like some damage hybrid build in order to squeeze as much DPS out of them as possible. Even specs such as Disc Priest, which are very DPS oriented, as they need to literally deal damage in order to heal their allies, even they are behind in DPS compared to Preservation Evoker, which right now might be the hardest hitting damage-wise healer that can do this passively, not actively, which is incredible right now. That being said, Preservation is still very difficult to play for the season. Doesn't necessarily have any specific comps that end up working for them necessarily the best, so I doubt it's going to be making the meta picks at the moment. But right now, besides Restoration Druids and Restoration Shamans, Preservation is another healer that's quite a standout, even though it's not nearly as popular as the alternatives, but definitely worth your time to check out for the season. Another class spec worth highlighting for the season is Beastmaster Hunter, which are fairly strong. They're just not quite as popular as Marksmanship Hunter, especially when it comes to high-end content, although Beastmaster is set right now on a chopping block to receive some brand new significant buffs all across the board, which might actually potentially even propel the Dark Ranger build quite ahead in pure single target situations, but maybe might even make it somewhat good in AoE content as well. What I think makes Beastmaster really good, but also really easy to play and very approachable, is some of the build variety they have for the season. Especially right now in Mythic Plus, you actually have a no multi-shot build that is incredibly strong for dungeons. Multi-shot is a very core skill to Beastmaster Hunter, so not running it for Mythic Plus dungeons is weird because it is your priority AoE ability. Not for the damage that it does, but because it procs Beast Cleave, causing your pets to cleave all nearby targets, making it a maintenance build that you have to maintain at all times. However, Beastmaster hunters out there were able to figure out a build that actually does not use that ability whatsoever, instead prioritizing far more single target damage overall, while still being able to gain significant AoE damage passively. So this allows them a build where they don't have to decide whether they want to go full AoE damage or single target damage. In fact, they can do both, and they can do both fairly effectively. Part of it is the tier set that allows them to summon stampedes whenever they use the ability of Bestial Wrath. So it allows them to deal a significant amount of physical damage of beasts running through the enemy just endlessly. But that's only one component of what makes their AoE damage actually viable and strong with this type of playstyle for the season. Another aspect is going to be Pack Leader. Whenever you pop Bestial Wrath together with your capstone, you're essentially forcing another beast to join you. Either the bear, which can do a bunch of damage to all enemies, or potentially the boar, which charges through enemies, cleaving them, causing your next Cobra shot to also cleave multiple targets, which can give you more kill commands, which is just a lot more damage. They're also heavily leaning into a Dire Beast build, trying to summon as many Dire Beasts as humanly possible, with talents such as Bloodshed allowing you a way increased chance to summon even more Dire Beasts than ever before. All those Dire Beasts that you summon gain passive cleave, so they'll just deal a lot of damage automatically, and if you rotate enough Dire Beasts out, you'll be able to call either Haughty or Fenrir, two powerful beasts that deal significant amount of AoE damage, especially Fenrir that has this massive cleave that cleaves everything all around you. Then you also added together Wild Speaker, where all those summoned Dire Beasts can now benefit from abilities like Kill Command, so you're able to churn out as many of these beasts as possible. So it's a gameplay loop between the tier set and the ability of Bestial Wrath, where Bestial Wrath summons a stampede of animals to trample over your targets. Bestial Wrath summons more beasts from the Pack Leader to cleave your targets down, and as you summon more Dire Beasts throughout an encounter, you'll be able to gain more cleave, more damage, and more overall passive AoE damage, while still prioritizing primarily single target damage output as a Pack Leader Beastmaster Hunter. Because of the uniqueness of this build, I definitely thought it was worth highlighting, especially for somebody who wants to play a range class, but maybe you're not really familiar with Hunter and want something easy to start with. I think Beastmaster in particular would be an incredibly good choice for any players trying to pick up a Hunter for the season. Another spec that I think is definitely worth highlighting is Brewmaster Monk, which has been a very long time since we've seen Brewmaster really be a shining example of what a tank should be for a season. I feel like a good portion of War Within has been kind of meandering this whole expansion. I think the last time Brew was actually insane was Battle for Azeroth, when they had the talent of Hot Trub that they could actually use within PvE content, causing them, whenever they purified Stagger, to deal fire damage to all things around them. That was really good back in the day, but since then they've really been just kind of a shell of what they were. Sometimes doing good in raids, but not really finding a lot of popularity for Mythic Plus dungeons. 11.2 changes really adjusted this completely for them, really give Brewmaster a huge turnaround when it comes to their overall viability. Definitely not the most popular spec by any means, as it still numerically is dwarfed by prop paladins, prop warriors, and even veg demon hunters in some cases, but it definitely has become a much more viable and a much stronger tank when it comes to this season in particular. The tier sets they have right now, whether you're playing as a Master Harmony or Shadowpad, are both very good. A lot of defensive changes from Celestial Infusion, which is like a massive damage reduction effect now, as well as updates to Niuzawa to make him actually strong and viable, even offering Niuzawa a little bit more AoE cleave capability and crowd control if that's what you're looking to do. It overall has allowed Brewmaster to be propelled a lot further when it comes to the overall strength within Mythic Plus. They are very good right now, and they are a tank that's able to push some of the highest Mythic Plus content out there. Not to mention, they're also very fun to play. But at the moment, they are right now kind of limited by comps. They have a very strong composition where if you pair them together with a melee physical damage comp, so bring a Brewmaster, Restoration Shaman, Warrior DPS, and as many physical DPS classes in that group as possible, that ends up being a very strong setup for Brewmasters in particular. And that's essentially where their strength comes from, is they're really good in a very specific composition, at least as of the moment. And this composition is somewhat strict, especially if you're looking to do some high-end content, as Brewmasters are not really seeing too much play outside of this comfort area, which likely leads to them overall having slightly less population popularity than the other tanks, but it doesn't mean that they're not viable and are not very strong for the season and are absolutely crushing it given the right circumstances. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give the video a like, as I would very much appreciate it, especially when it comes to the YouTube meta and the YouTube algorithm. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with any future major updates like Legion Remix or potentially Midnight Alpha. If we get any more updates regarding those, we usually tend to post that pretty regularly over in our Discord channel. As always, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.